Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you for the invitation to the National Monitoring Center for Biodiversity. This is a very exciting event for us. I'm here representing a very, very large consortium of partners implementing the so-called EBOCC Preparatory Action. And today, I will lead you to this very complex and challenging, but also very promising project that started 6 months ago. And I hope that at the end, you will have some clarity on the kind of work that we are trying to do here. So the content will be a very introduction to the tender procedure, because this is important to understand the frame of the project, what it's supposed to deliver in the end. Also a short description of the project as such and who is implementing it. We'll talk about the thematic areas, the so-called essential biodiversity variables, and how this project is organized as a matrix and how challenging it is to work in such a project. We will show you our first findings and results and things that we are working on right now. And then hopefully we will have time to reflect on successes, challenges, and lessons learned so far. So I will begin right away to tell you a little bit about the tender. This was published in the TED, in the platform for tenders of the European Union last year before summer. It was published as an open procedure. That means that any organization, company, institution active in the territories of the European Union or associated countries can participate. It was a service contract. That means that it is not a science endeavor, but a commercial project. And it's called a preparatory action, which in the European frame means that it should gain experiences, assess impacts, analyze gaps, and provide recommendations for things that are to come at a later stage. That means the EBOCC preparatory action is not EBOCC, so we are not building the actual proper European Biodiversity Observation and Coordination Center, but we are piloting some activities in order to find out what would be the best way to establish this kind of center in the future. As was mentioned before, the terms of reference and by definition also the project builds very strongly on the Horizon 2020 EuropaBON outputs and the recommendations. One of the main points in the tender was to involve as many member state authorities as possible. We tried to make this happen by engaging with a lot of national agencies. You will see them in a moment when I present them. The budget is 7 million euros, and the implementation time began this year at the beginning of the year with the inception phase of 1 month. So it began actually at mid-February, and it will go on until the end of 2028. So what is the scope of EBOCC? It was already mentioned before. It's to propose pathways to map and streamline data workflows in all EU member states for a very defined set of so-called essential biodiversity variables, or EBVs, from certain thematic areas, as they were called in the terms of reference, meaning terrestrial, freshwater, and marine domains. The project should also contribute to reducing duplication and administrative burden for EU member states, also in terms of the reporting obligations of European member states related to the different directives and regulations relevant for biodiversity. And a third very important point is the project should support the establishment of more fair data workflows. You know the term, it means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. It's a principle that it's embedded in European policy making and that we are trying to make happen. So we have a lot of specific objectives, but some of them are to diagnose and respond to member state needs. I think this is important to point out that the EBOCC preparatory action looks mainly at reporting obligations. That doesn't mean that the sources of data and the efforts of non-governmental stakeholders are not relevant. They are highly relevant, but the end result should be information, data sets, indicators, and that are usable for European reporting. The project should also foster coordination and exchange of good practice, something that we are doing very actively in collaborating with a lot of different organizations, with a lot of different projects, programs, and initiatives. Just to give a couple of examples, we have talked to GBIF, we have worked together with Biodiversity Plus, with BioAgora, with the National Center in Germany. So these are just some examples of all the work we do in terms of fostering coordination. One of the examples is, of course, this lecture today. Another of the objectives is to deliver harmonized and interoperable data flows, but as you will see in a while, not for all biodiversity data in Europe, but as a pilot only for these so-called thematic areas that I will present later. Also to generate actionable policy relevant indicators in our task 5, which will be also only a selection, and to build capacity across key actors that can be data producers, data users, etc. So how I was talking about the tender, and now you see the consortium we came up with at that time, which reflects also, unfortunately, the availability of partners to be involved in a very, very complex offer preparation in the summer months last year. It was a very, very difficult endeavor to make this happen. So I'm very thankful that we were able to find partners that were willing to embark with us in this journey. So Adelphi Consult is a consulting company based in Germany with a lot of experience for the European Commission that is leading the project and providing all the project management and financial support for implementation, but also leading on 2 tasks, as I will present later. Then you have the Umweltbundesamt, the Austrian Environment Agency, where I work, that is leading also on some tasks and has some thematic leads. Then the Finnish Environment Institute, SIKE, Finland, who's leading on several tasks and is very involved also in thematic areas such as freshwater and marine domains. We have the Martin Luther University and specifically IDIF, because we wanted to have someone who was very, very involved in the EuropaBON project present in this project to make sure that the spirit of the concept developed by EuropaBON is present in the work we do. So we have IDIF, Enrique Pereira and colleagues involved in this project. Then we have the French Biodiversity Agency, OFB, who has a lot of international experience and is well networked in the community and has been essential in making this happen. But also Vito, a company that works for the European Commission in terms of data infrastructure, data flows, data management, and whose experience is key for this project. On the other hand, we have a lot of subcontractors. We have IMBO, the Research Institute for Nature and Forest in Belgium. We have the museum, the National Natural History Museum in France, who's helping us a lot with topics related to pollinators, among others. We have the Flanders Marine Institute, LIS, who will be key in helping us identify the best data sources and help us implement the project related in all things related to marine issues. And we have 2 smaller contributors from Austria and Germany who help us on the one side with data management issues and on the other side with practicalities like logistics, administration, backup, and support. And on the right side of the slide, you see everybody we are working with. Not only, there are many, many other names, but these are, the short list as an example. So you have the European Commission, which is our client. Then you have the European Biodiversity Platform, both the usual meetings. This is a platform where biodiversity policy is discussed between member states and the European Commission, if you don't know it. And they have working groups. One of them is the Monitoring and Assessment Working Group. So we are very often participating in these meetings and sometimes reporting on the progress of this project. We work very closely with the European Environment Agency, as they are a key stakeholder when it comes to European reporting. With IONET, which is associated with the EEA, if you know, which are representatives from the member states involved in biodiversity reporting, not only, but also biodiversity reporting and monitoring, with the European topic centers, with the ENCA network, the network of the conservation agencies in Europe, with GBIF and VLIS, as I mentioned before, as data visualizers and initiatives that are important, very important and key stakeholders in Europe, but also with other initiatives like Biodiversity, Biodiversity meets data. There's a small mistake there in the signs. I apologize. BMD, BioAgora, the Project Tetris, and many others. So after 6 months of implementation, some key questions have been arising that are reflected in the tasks and give you an overview over what we want to try to answer. Which one is, what are the main challenges that the EU member states face in mobilizing, accessing, and integrating data for the EBVs that are part of this contract? Which data can be provided by the EU member states to support these specific essential biodiversity variables? And what are the most urgent gaps? This will be done in 2 tasks that I will describe shortly. Then you have the integration of existing monitoring systems, where we will ask ourselves, how can the EU directives and regulations on monitoring national biodiversity schemes and research infrastructures be connected, work together without duplicating efforts? This is something that will be looked at by task 3, among others. And then you have the harmonization of monitoring protocols, a very difficult task because there are a lot of different protocols in different member states. So what would be minimum common standards that strike a balance between practicality and reflecting the different context in the different member states, but at the same time provide the necessary interoperability and harmonization needed to analyze the selected EBVs for this contract. Other emerging issues are related to the strategic relevance of EBVs, which means which of the indicators are more critical to support the EU priorities and streamlining EU member state reporting obligations. This will be done in the visualization task, task 5. What are the capacity building priorities of member states in terms of the implementation of pollinator, of the EU pollinator monitoring system, EuropaBONs? This is task 6. And how can we mobilize stakeholders and work together with everybody to not duplicate efforts already being done, use the information available as much as possible, and reflect the different interest positions, etc., that actors are bringing to the table. Just as a point of clarification, the EBOCC Preparatory Action will not handle aspects related to governance of a future EBOCC. But of course, the lessons learned in terms of having applied the concept to certain variables and data sets will be essential for the future deliberations on how an EBOCC should be designed. And this also builds up a lot, or will surely build up on efforts by other projects, programs, like for instance, Biodiversity Plus, who has made significant work in deliberating on these issues. So of these key questions, you can see now the matrix that we came up with during the preparation of the offer for this project. So on the left side, you have all the tasks. And if you see them, you will see that it's the data value chain. So you have on the one side, the data workflows, mobilization and integration of data in task 2. Then you have the data frameworks and infrastructures. On task 4, you have the monitoring protocols. Task 5 deals with analysis and visualization of information. And task 6, as mentioned before, is a capacity building task for EuropaBONs for pollinator monitoring. Task 7 is the communication task. In the upper row of the table, you will see the thematic areas that are subject to this project. I will give you more details in a minute. But as you can see, there are 6 of them. 5 of them, terrestrial habitats, freshwater benthic invertebrates, freshwater habitats, marine mammals, and seagrass habitats will be subject of tasks 1 to 5. The pollinators are only subject of the 6 because, as I mentioned, EuPOMS is already a very advanced monitoring scheme and has to be implemented at the national level. So there was no sense in making a pilot, but we will support member states in applying it. So very shortly, because there are lots of tasks and time is of the essence if we want to discuss, you see that we have Task 1, the analysis of data workflows. So we'll map out key actors and their roles in monitoring biodiversity. The data sources will be mapped out. We will try to analyze data workflows and gaps, and this will lead to reports on thematic fish with best practice and recommendations. Of course, we will build up on existing desktop research on studies and things that have been done in Europe already, but not only. What will be the key output of task 1? You'll see that we will know and have clarity on who does what is existing on the member states, what's missing, and how it is all connected. The value for the EU member states is that we can contribute to reducing fragmentation, contribute to a better use of the national data, and align with the reporting priorities. Task 2 is the data mobilization and integration task. You see that here is from the myriad of data sources, we will have 40 variables that we're dealing with, reduce it, because this is a pilot, and even though it sounds like it's a lot of budget, of course, if you really want to make a proof of concept, that requires a lot of work and coordination with institutions, European and national, etc. So we will have to prioritize the data sources, make proposals for the harmonization of data flow and the improvement of the interoperability. And this will lead to the development of knowledge products and support activities to data mobilization in the EU member states related to those specific essential biodiversity variables. You can always see at the end of the slide on the right side, the person in charge of this. If you are curious and you want to get in contact with them, just send me a message. I will give you my email address at the end. And of course, you can get in touch with them. So what is the value for member states from task 2? To improve the AI readiness of the biodiversity data, both at the national and transnational European level, to promote the use and foster the use of the FAIR principles as discussed at the beginning, and to strengthen the technical and organizational capacity for the mobilization of biodiversity data. This is very difficult, but we hope that by prioritizing certain data sets, we'll be able to make a proof of concept. Task 3 is all about that data framework, infrastructure, and tools. So you see that there will be also an initial analysis of the existing data infrastructure and tools. There will be proposals for improving data infrastructures, but this will also include outreach to make sure that this is in line with the national context and the stakeholders' context, and it's a practicable solution. We will assess how systems can be connected in an automatic way, and infrastructures, namely. And we will also provide analytical tools within the project for the pilot application. This will lead to a report that will give you a map of the biodiversity data infrastructure and protocols, identify gaps to support the EBVs that have been identified for this project, a blueprint for an architecture, and proposal for improving data structure and automation in Europe. So for the member states, of course, this brings more efficiency and hopefully effectiveness of biodiversity monitoring in the whole of Europe. Task 4 is about the data collection protocols. So here we will do something very similar. We will map out the different monitoring methods and protocols, sampling strategies, and performance and analysis in the hope of making a reference library to foster more collaboration and innovation in the member states and among stakeholders, but also to make proposals for harmonization and, if necessary, proposals for new protocols. We will develop and implement also aligned sampling strategies in a pilot effort, and and make thematic fish related to field protocols and sampling techniques. This will lead to guidelines for European standards that are not binding, but like recommendations towards a more harmonized landscape. What is the value for member states? Well, there will be an inventory and library of methods that can be accessed and used as a reference for future efforts. We hope that this will contribute to harmonization of protocols and practical guidelines, and we will do this thematic fish that hopefully will serve as an inspiration for more harmonization. So task 5 is an analysis and visualization of the information. So here again, I must mention GBIF and BLIS, two actors that are very actively involved in Europe in these areas. And here the subtask is the selection and not so much the development of special explicit indicators for policy and the connection to the EU reporting obligations. Then making for these data sets that were developed in the tasks before, making a statistical analysis and illustration and identifying gaps, then making data-derived products, and then supporting the minimization of redundancies by making recommendations and thematic fish with some technical guidance on the matter. What is the value added? Well, to lower the administrative workload from EU member states and decrease redundancies, and also to make a better overview or understanding of the existing national data possible, and having ideas on how to integrate the different initiatives, platforms, and have a more coherent visualization and analysis within Europe. Task 6 is the one before the last. Task 6 is capacity building and development needs. There will be capacity building for the other essential biodiversity variables related to the thematic fish that I was mentioning, but the main core of this task is the support of EU member states for the implementation of the EU pollinator monitoring scheme, or EuropaBONs. And this will has already started because, as you know, this must be implemented next year. So time is of the essence in view of the vegetation period in Europe to make the necessary preparations right now. This task will work mainly on administrative and logistical aspects of the EuropaBONs implementation and not so much on taxonomic expertise and capacity building. This reflects the need to avoid duplication because there are other European projects or EU-funded projects that are making a great contribution to developing the taxonomic expertise on pollinators across Europe, namely and mainly the project EPIC. Task 7 is the communication task. Communication is focused within EBOCC on a large conference at the project's end that will present the results, lessons learned, recommendations, and discuss them with a quite large group of stakeholders. So we hope that you will count with some of you for this endeavor in the future. So what does this mean for us? You see the EBVs here. I will go very quickly through them because you can always speak very lengthy about these things, and within the consortium, as you saw in the matrix structure, you have on the one side data experts that work with environmental data, not necessarily with biodiversity. Then you have the whole thematic lead experts that are biologists, ecologists, and work with the essential biodiversity variables. And then you have people like me who are more on the policy side of things and on the project management side of things. So we have always to make this work and try to use all this expertise and different viewpoints to make something happen. So you see here the terrestrial habitats. So in Europe, we have a rich diversity of habitat types listed in, for instance, in the Annex 1 of the Habitats Directive, but you have a high level of data heterogeneity, so there's a need for a strategic habitat prioritization and for developing workflows based on the essential biodiversity variables for this project. So this is what we will try to achieve. On the next slide, if I'm able to pass it, because this is not working right now, you have the freshwater benthic invertebrates. This is one of the most monitoring variables in the Water Framework. That within the Water Framework Directive, there's 25 years of extensive data and standard methods, so we hope that we will be able to provide insights on how current monitoring can support biodiversity assessment. And this will build on the work of EuropaBON, the Water Framework Directive, biological quality elements, monitoring, etc. On freshwater habitats, we have the UNIS freshwater habitats that are running on running and standing waters, but those have been under revision since 2016. So some of you will know about this. So there is a modified prototype for running and standing waters in discussion, and for a selected smaller and rare aquatic habitats group. So these prototype descriptions will inform the work that we are doing within EBOCC. What we will do is to select a subset of EBVs that is representative of all UNIS freshwater habitats that can cover all biogeographical regions in Europe, and both lakes and rivers, of course. So this is the level of ambition here. For marine mammals, you see the species distribution of marine mammals is part of the variable, and there are other variables. So we will make use of surveys that have already been conducted at the regional sea levels. We will work together with initiatives in the Mediterranean and in other areas. And we will try to address things like gaps in monitoring systems that are mainly conducted at the national level and do not always cooperate together. We will deal with things like protocol harmonization and the use of common databases. For seagrass, the EBV is related to ecosystem distribution of seagrass habitats, as you can read. So EMODNet will be a good start for data collection. They have many data sets of spatial data. There are many projects that are currently running and also focusing on mapping seagrass extent and proposing improvements. So there's a lot to work on. And there has been some workshops on the matter that have produced significant results that we can use. So what we want is to make sure that the work we do within EBOCC builds on the already good work by the essential ocean variable community. The last one is pollinators. So this is an EBV where, as I said, the work will be focused on capacity building, so I won't go too much into this. So what does this mean for us as a project? This, as you see, it's a very complex endeavor. It's a matrix structure. As I said, there are lots of colleagues with different backgrounds and visions and priorities. So we have to bring all these people together and make them work. And this means, unfortunately, meetings, and more meetings. So you see here that we meet twice a year on a strategic level, and you have once a month, we have meetings with task leaders, thematic leads. We have 6 task meetings every month. We have project management meetings twice a week. We have coordination meetings with the EC and the EA once a quarter, and many other, ad hoc coordination meetings. We regularly meet with other actors, and each organization has also, of course, internal meetings to organize themselves. So it's a very, very difficult task to make everyone being coherent, and I want to thank all colleagues involved in the consortium because it has been a wonderful experience, and it has worked, and everyone has been aware of the need to really talk to each other. So what we are doing at the moment is we are gathering existing knowledge within the tasks, using whatever we can find. And the thematic leads dedicated to the essential biodiversity variables that I described are collecting information and also reaching out to colleagues in order to make sure that everything is covered. What will come very soon is a query, a questionnaire. I know that there is a questionnaire fatigue within actors and member states, and lots has been done. However, as we're focusing on a proof of concept, and as we're focusing on very specific data sets for very specific EBVs, we need to have a level of detail that perhaps is not always contained within the work done so far. And we also want to mobilize data. So all this will be done through this questionnaire that will be sent via IONET with the support of the European Environment Agency. And what we will do is we will organize 2 webinars at the end of the summer and I think sometime during the summer to support filling in the questionnaire and also providing an opportunity for question and answers. So on task 6, we also have been very active. We have developed technical guidance for the implementation of EuropaBONs that hasn't been published yet, but will be hopefully published before summer. It will have less than 25 pages and be a non-binding practical set of recommendations to implement the monitoring scheme. As mentioned before, focused on administrative and logistical aspects of the implementation, so governance, coordination, budgeting, the selection of monitoring sites, the technical planning, tender preparation, etc., the operationalization in terms of the logistics behind the very complex fieldwork required, and the equipment. And sometime later during the year, we will expand this technical guidance to data flows with recommendations for infrastructure, tools, and quality assurance. We have also had a peer-to-peer exchange with member states within task 6, where they reported on the progress so far in the implementation of EuropaBONs and exchange lessons learned, their priorities and approaches, and their challenges, which was really very well welcomed. Over 20 member states participated in Brussels in these discussions, as you can see in the pictures, and it was a very helpful tool. We will repeat this later this year, and there will be also a webinar series on some aspects related to the technical guidance that I described before, or needs expressed by the member states. So that's from my side. You can see here the contact details of the EBOCC Preparatory Action. I'm the project manager, Hugo Rivera, and I'm always happy to receive inquiries, requests for collaboration, or anything. Johannes Stahl from Adelphi is our deputy project manager. He's also available for any query. If you want to reach any of the names that you saw on my slides, just reach out to us and we'll put you in contact with them. And I'm happy, looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.